threw in on Friday. So we're going to do that at a remote location this week in order to make sure that we get some of our work in still.
Top secret remote location?
Not very top secret, but yeah, we'll be somewhere in between.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Sanford is the opponent for the Citadel Bulldogs this weekend. The Dogs will be playing the Bulldogs on Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, so looking forward to that. We're going to get to a lot of those things as we go along in the program here tonight. We'll talk about the polls, for example, here in just a second, and I noticed that in one poll, the Citadel Bulldogs fell back a spot. That was the FCS coaches poll. And then you have the circumstance where in the Stats FCS poll this week, the Bulldogs go up and are number 8 in the circumstances. So that's a good scenario. I know you don't care much about the polls. What this means to me is if you drop a spot in the coaches poll, that just tells me that the coaches don't necessarily know what they're doing in this circumstance. What do you think about that, Coach?
Well, apparently not. But the other thing is I don't even know what's going on. I didn't even know where these polls were at. I knew, kind of we were ranked somewhere in the, top 15, top 10, top 25. I don't pay too much attention as to where we are at, exactly ranked in there because I don't know that it matters just yet. Week 7 or week 8, it kind of starts to, filter itself out and filter itself down. Now, you're looking at teams that were in the top 25 preseason, and they're not even in existence in the top 25 anymore. So I'm happy to be in the top 25, that's for sure. But, at the end of the day, only number 1 matters.
That's for sure. That's for sure. But now the way to look at it is this, in my opinion, is that you are in a circumstance where your name is associated with being in the polls all the time. That's where you want to be. After 2 or 3 years, you kind of want to be consistently ranked, and then that helps you stay ranked. Name recognition going pretty good for you.
And that's what we talked about all last year was our resume. What was our resume? We were building our resume last year. Same thing this year is we're continuing to build our resume. Each year we've got to build our resume, but if you have a resume of being a playoff team, you're going to stay up there. There's teams that are up there every single year. The Villanovas, the James Madisons, the North Dakotas, the South Dakotas, all of them. I mean, they're all got great resumes. Youngstown, we would just love to be mentioned in that group right there. Wofford's up in that group. And we certainly, we think we're good enough to be mentioned in there. We just want to make sure that we put a good product out on the field.
Coming up on the program here tonight from Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown, some of the things we're going to get to with Coach, things that associated themselves with the open date, just to kind of do a little recap where that is concerned. The stretch of games, even though you take them one at a time, the stretch of games is an interesting stretch of games, and it includes a 2-game homestand. Also, we're going to talk with Coach, take him down memory lane. He's been involved. This will be the 4th time that he will have been involved in a game against Sanford. There have been some very interesting games involving Sanford and the Citadel Bulldogs in their past. And we'll really dig in deep on the Sanford Bulldogs for this weekend's game, which begins at 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. We'll talk about the health of the ball club as well, and if this is the biggest test or not. One thing I do want to mention, this is brand new too, and Coach Reed joins me here in the next segment, is that the gentlemen and ladies who are in the ownership positions here at Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue have put together a special. And it is a special, Coach, that involves the cadets because Wednesday's a decent night for them to kind of get out and about just a little bit. And so the folks at Fiery Ron's have made it very interesting for them to come out and be here on a Wednesday night. And here's the new special. It starts tonight, and every Wednesday when we have a show with Coach here from 6 until close, Citadel cadets get wings for 50% off. 50% off.
That's a steal, Mike.
They're
Absolute
crazy.
Steal.
You know how they hear all the car dealers will say, the boss is crazy. They've gone crazy. 50% off wings from 6 p.m. until close on Wednesday nights when Coach is here and on nights when we have a show. That is every Wednesday until November the 8th. Now, the trick is it's a dine-in only scenario, but that should be bringing some Citadel cadets down to Home Team Barbecue at 126 Williman Street, and we'd love to see them. Love to see those guys.
Mike, I think that's a great opportunity. I'd love to see them. We're fairly close to campus. It's a Wednesday. We've got general leave on Wednesday, so I think this would be a great opportunity for some of our cadets to come down and enjoy what I enjoy every Wednesday. That's the wings.
That's right. That's right. Coach is ready to dig into a dozen himself right now. We're going to take our first break of the show and come back and get right back into it. This is the Brent Thompson Radio Show, and it's on Wednesday nights from Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown at 126 Williman Street on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM.
When you're feeling
and
hungry,
9:10
you don't
a.m.
want to mess around with a quarter-pound meat sandwich. Instead,
TD Bank's new intern, Bart, is one of those robots from another bank. We're training him to bank human. Bart, why are you winding the clock back?
The clock stated 11:35 p.m., but they are still working.
The clock is fine. Our live customer service is available all night, and all day for that matter. He's learning.
At TD Bank, we do things differently.
Hello?
Like live customer service.
Hello?
24/7. Don't just bank. Bank human.
Since 2002, the lottery has helped award more than 1 million scholarships. So when you play, you're not just taking a chance. You're also giving one.
The great thing about an old truck is you can treat it like an old truck, which is exactly why you got a truck in the first place. It's not old, it's broken in. So keep it running longer, stronger, with quality parts and a whole lot of Napa know-how. That's not gonna buff out.
TD Bank's new intern, Bart, is one of those robots from another bank. We're training him to bank human.
All right, we are back from Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown,
Bart,
126
why are
Williman
you
Street.
winding the
This is
clock
Brent
back?
Thompson
The clock
Radio
stated
Show. I'm your host, Mike
11:35
Leggett.
p.m.,
Thank you very much for
but
being with us today.
they are still
Look
working.
at
The
that
clock
bunch
is
of
fine.
Citadel
Our
Blue
live
people
customer
there,
service is
particularly
available
on that
all
front
night
row. We've
and
got
all
some
day
in
for that
second
matter.
row as well. So good to see you all this evening.
He's learning.
At TD Bank, we
better
do
to
things
see
differently.
some than others.
Like live customer
It's just the way
service.
it kinda works out
24/7.
from time to
Don't
time.
just
Yeah,
bank.
especially in
Bank
that front
human.
row right there. I got you.
There's some characters in that front row, that is for sure. Good to have
Since
you with us tonight, whether you're
2002,
listening
the
on
lottery
radio,
has helped
whether you're
award
in
more
person,
than
whether
1
you're
million
watching on YouTube.
scholarships.
We got your bases covered. The Citadel Bulldogs had an idle week
So when you
for an
play,
open date last week.
you're not
And
just
then
taking a
the
chance.
Sanford Bulldogs coming up on Saturday afternoon in Birmingham. 3
You're also
o'clock is the
giving one.
kickoff time. So now I want to get your thoughts, Coach, on kind of a news of the day or news of the last 2 days, kind of a scenario. Yesterday morning, just before 10 a.m., news broke across the country and really took the country by storm that there were FBI arrests that had to do with college basketball. It had to do with some assistant coaches and recruiting, and that whole thing has really blown up. And so in the interest of talking about something that's in the news, obviously basketball coaches right now are feeling like, there's a bit of a black eye going on there. I'm wondering whether you think something like that, given where things are right now, is that something we're going to be talking about where college football is concerned? Is that kind of an expectation? Because, some of the similar things exist. Shoes, apparel, agents, financial advisors, stuff like that. Where do you think this might go?
Anytime there's big money involved, there's always that kind of a fear out there. And there's certainly big money involved in college football, and not necessarily at our level all the time, but at college basketball, anytime that there's all that money to be made by somebody out there, the main difference between basketball and football is just the amount of time that there is. You can leave college after 1 year in basketball, so it's a little bit more of a quicker turnover. They've got the AAU leagues. We're starting to get these 7-on-7 leagues all throughout the high school football. So it's, I think it could be coming down our way. Unfortunately, I hope it doesn't come down our way, but I'm sure there's some things going on out there that we don't know about. Because once again, it does involve some big money.
It definitely does. There are some very big dollars involved in all of this sort of stuff here. And nobody wants to have a black eye on the profession that they spend their time on. So it makes me wonder, though, because the head coach is responsible for so much already, and now you're responsible for everything that has to do with all of the assistant coaches that you have and the sheer numbers of it. It feels like you couldn't take a single minute off. You've got to be watching something all the time.
We often say, a lot of us pride ourselves on knowing exactly what's going on with our players, with our staff, with our support staff, with our alumni. And the truth is you'll never, ever probably know exactly everything that's going on because people keep things from you. But you'd certainly like to think you do. And like I said, we do pride ourselves on that. Unfortunately, there are going to be instances where that go on, but, as they say, the buck stops with you, I guess, right?
How does the whole process work? Obviously, you have a recruiting coordinator in your office, but with rules changes that happen all the time, how do you keep up with all of it? How do you make sure the staff is up on everything? Obviously, there are certifications and stuff like that, but that must be a tall task.
Yeah, we recertify every year. We recertify with the new rules every single year. We take an online test. And it's not designed to trick or fool you. It's designed for you to look up the rules and have a good idea and the grasp of why the rules came about. I think it's an overall tone that you set with your staff as well, that you're not going to condone any sort of rules violations. And throughout your whole organization, throughout your whole program, throughout your whole alumni, the compliance director is always involved. Even with all the head coaches, we have a head coaches meeting with the compliance director about certain hot topic issues. We get emailed all the time about all these issues that come down the line at us, certain things to stay away from. And there's certain scenarios where you don't even know that there's a rule violation going on right there. And certainly it's an education process throughout, and it continues to educate because there are certain things that you would think they're fairly benign, but when you look at them in the rule scope of things, you can understand why the rule is in place.
The person that sits in that compliance seat has a tough job, because their job is to, if something is close to the line, the rule would be, I'd rather maybe we didn't go there. You're looking for every competitive advantage because, it's your job to win games and get the best kids in. You're competitive as well, though, and you want to have every advantage you can possibly get.
The best compliance officers do this is they educate, and they also they work with you. They find ways to be able to, get your staff to understand why the rules are in place, what rules are there, and why they're there, of course. So the education is the big thing. They're also there to help you out. If you don't feel like you can go to your compliance officer with anything, then that makes it very difficult. But we've got a very good one. She was just hired a couple months ago, and she's been doing a great job of educating us. And anything that we've gone to her, she's either found the answer, researched it, or asked somebody that knows, because certain things can be construed as very gray in that book. And we do need a rules interpretation at times.
And we've talked about this on this show before, but just while we're on the topic here, with more and more people on social media, more and more kids on social media, talk about the rules that you have to stay within and the things that you're now allowed to do with recruits, your own kids, when it comes to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, all the different things that they can do and they're doing while they're holding those smartphones in their hands.
Yeah, we've got to draw the line, and it's great because it's free advertising for us. We're marketing our football program. The one thing that we can't do is we can't do anything in a public forum. We can't retweet somebody's. We can't retweet an individual player's message. We can like it at this point on Twitter. That was a rule change, but you can't put anything on public. You can't necessarily tag them or call them out on anything. But you can certainly direct message them if you've got a picture, what we call edits, and a lot of the edits are going around that they post on their Twitter. You can direct message that to them, and then they can repost that. So you got to be very, very careful with all these little these nuances that are coming about with the social media. I think it's great on one hand. It can be very time consuming. We've got a young man that handles a lot of our edits, and we've kind of formed a department to be able to handle that stuff within the football offices. Things that I couldn't do personally, but they're creative enough on Photoshop to be able to get great edits out there. Zeke does a good job with our football Twitter, and it's all about our marketing of our program and what we want it to say.
We're with Coach Brent Thompson. This is the Brent Thompson Radio Show, and it's live tonight from 126 Williman Street, downtown at Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue, talking about a few of those things. And, I guess coaches over the course of time, because we all know there are coaches who are a lot older than you are and have been around the game a lot longer that have had to kind of adjust based on what kids do and what kids notice. You kind of had to get in line or be at the back of the line.
You know, Mike, I found myself right on that edge right there, right on the verge. Email was just coming about when I was in college. The internet was just coming about when I was in college. So I find myself I can go on both sides of this thing. I'm still fairly far behind of the social media is not my strong point. But I have people, and I've hired people to kind of make up for that. And that's where the younger generation has come in. I've got a young man on my staff that does a great job with Photoshop. And part of the reason why I hired him is I looked at all of his edits. He's well organized. He helps out on the defensive side, and then on the side he does a little bit of edits for us. So everybody's kind of pitched in. The younger guys have kind of pitched in, and I've made a huge really emphasis on that. Is when Coach Houston was here, we didn't have that department, and it was starting to be a need and a necessity for us to get our name out there. And as we were having more and more progress on the football field, we needed to have a bigger presence in the Twitter sphere, as we say. We've got a guy, Coach Gunner, on staff, does a good job with it. I've got guys that can handle that. I'm more of a retweeter than I am a put-out tweets there. But, it certainly is a way to get your name out there.
I've been meaning to talk to you. I'm very upset with you. There was a retweet of a retweet I put out the other day, and you didn't retweet it. So
don't be offended if I don't pick up on one of your tweets, because I don't look at it very often, and when I do, I certainly don't post a whole lot.
We're going to take a timeout when we come back. More with Coach, because we're in Sanford week now, as the Citadel Bulldogs will take on the Sanford Bulldogs. We're going to take a little look back at some of the Sanford games that Coach has been involved with. Matter of fact, when the Mike Houston staff came in, it was my first year, so all of the box scores and stats and stuff that I have tucked away in a drawer that I pull out for occasions like when we're going to play a particular team, they match up. So 2014 being their first year and mine, we're kind of able to look back at some of the same games and some of the same scenarios that happened there. And Sanford has been an interesting opponent for the Citadel Bulldogs for several reasons, and we'll deal with that when we come back. Coach and I are at Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown. It's at 126 Williman Street, and we'll continue in a moment on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM and 910 AM.
Sorry, Dad.
Sure, you could get him a new car. You could also light a pile of money on fire. Because as long as Mr. It wasn't my fault takes the wheel on occasion, maintaining this car is your best option. So keep it running longer, stronger, with quality parts and a whole lot of Napa know-how.
Dad, where are you going?
Buying a home is a big financial decision, so you need a strong team working on your mortgage. That team is at South Atlantic Bank.
Decisions are made right here in our community by mortgage professionals who really know the Low Country.
South Atlantic Bank offers competitive rates and terms on loans for home purchase or refinance. If you need a mortgage loan, you need the mortgage loan professionals at South Atlantic Bank.
South Atlantic Bank Mortgage Group, providing the keys to home ownership.
We are back at Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown, 126 Williman Street, for another edition of the Brent Thompson Radio Show with the head coach. I am Mike Legg. Thank you very much for being alongside. We're back again here next week from 7 until 8. And again, let me remind you of the special that has just been established. I would imagine that next week it'll take off significantly for Citadel cadets. 50% off wings from 6 p.m. until close on Wednesdays, on nights when we do this show, which is every Wednesday until November the 8th. The only catch is it is a dine-in only scenario. So we want to see all of the young men and women who would want to come by and get 50% off the wings. I can certainly tell you that you're going to enjoy that when you do it. Coaches alongside, we're talking about Sanford this week. And with Sanford, the Sanford Bulldogs have been an interesting part of your staff. And when you were the offensive coordinator under Mike Houston, you have been interestingly tied to this ball club. The first game that I can recall was the one here in 2014. Now, that's not the most positive of recollections for you, I realize, because that was a game that the Bulldogs had that slipped out of their fingers. And so I thought it would be interesting to kind of take back a little bit, because Sanford has been in a certain place in the league. You guys have been in a certain place in the league, and you've grown where they maybe have stayed the same. But let's look back at some of those games, because they've somewhat been classics. The only one that was kind of a blowout, and it was for a good reason, was when you were at their place in 2015. So in 2014, what do you remember about that ball game at Johnson-Haggett Stadium, Coach?
Well, there was a lot to remember. It was a great game. It was a great back-and-forth game. Extremely talented, both sides of the ball. They were good on offense and good on defense that year. They were pretty stout. It was all we could do to move the football on them. And eventually, late in the game, I thought we had an opportunity, and we did. We ended up taking the lead late in the game. There's two incidences in that game right there. We all remember I believe it was a 4th and long or 3rd and long in the last drive, and then they had the trick play on a previous drive where they played the old Little Giants on us, and we've replayed that one over and over in our minds. People forget about there was a touchdown that was called back in that game. And they had said that we had 2 guys in motion on it, and we didn't have 2 guys in motion on it. So that could have easily changed the game. And we also had a great drive at the end of the game to where Aaron Miller drove us all the way down the field, and I believe we took a 4-point lead late into the 4th quarter that day. And then we kicked it back to them, and they, of course, were able to come down and score and converted a 4th and long. So that was a complete back-and-forth game. It was a great football game. Unfortunately, we ended up on the wrong side of that one late in the game.
What did that tell you back then about your ball club, though? Where you needed to be in the league? All of the things that go into measuring up against your opponents, particularly in league play. What did that game tell you? We
weren't far off. At that point, we weren't far off. There was just a few things that needed to go our way. There was a few things that we needed to get done. Aaron Miller actually was just in to see me today, and I was telling him I saw him in that game. We'd been going back and watching that game a little bit. And, he had put together a great finishing drive in that game, and unfortunately we couldn't get the win, and that really would have put us, it was late in the year. I think that would have given us a chance to have a winning season. Unfortunately, I think we went 5-7 that year. But it was that was a memorable game, that's for sure. We weren't that far off at that point.
That was the 2014 game, November the 15th of 2014. And it's amazing to me how much you actually remember about what went on in the game, some of the nuances. You referred to it being a 4-point game. It was 17-13. So is it always that way, or is it, I think Mike Houston said at the time that may have been one of the harder losses he ever had to swallow.
Absolutely. That was definitely one of our harder losses. We certainly didn't lose a whole lot of games at Lenoir-Rhyne. Obviously, probably the national championship game was tough to take because we had made it so far. We probably had a playoff game that was a year before that was tough to take prior to that. But really, we had come so far, and we had thought that we were almost taking the corner at that time here. And we were going toe-to-toe with a very good Sanford team, very talented. And I thought our kids played extremely hard that day.
Now we move on, though, to 2015, Coach Houston's second and final season. And I remember at the time going to Birmingham that I wasn't sure exactly what kind of team you had. Where, going into the Sanford game in 2015, did you feel like your football team was?
We thought if we won 6 games that year, we would be doing okay. We felt like we were making progress. The Sanford game was it was a pivot for us. I thought more than anything, it was our defense. Our defense came to play. We had some short fields. We had a great drive. I remember we go 3 and out. We punt it back to them. We pin them deep. They kick back to us, and we take the next play on that drive all the way down, and we take it into the score. Vinny Miller had an outstanding block. Dominique had a great run that time. And that was kind of the trigger point for us in that game is we were able to drive the football. We were able to get some big plays. We were kind of keeping them on the field. The defense was getting off the field. I think we had a turnover for a touchdown. I can remember being in the box and saying, wow, this defense is finally where we thought we were at LR when we had finally, arrived there.
A scoop and score in that particular game. I think it was a strip sack and then a scoop and score is what put you in the situation there. Coming out of that game, because this was a 7-7 ball game at halftime in 2015, and then you really erupted in that second quarter, as you were alluding to in some instances. Did you come out of that game saying, you know what, bets are off, 6 wins, maybe we're undershooting it just a little bit here because maybe we've got a really special football team here?
At that time we were just saying, hey, we'll take one game at a time. We'll say this is progress, but we can't get overly excited about it. We still got to get through the next one. And I believe we rattled off, I think, the next 4 until we got to the Chattanooga game. Is that correct?
That sounds right, yeah. That sounds right. Things were going well in that particular year. Dominique Allen had 166 yards on the ground there, and I know a lot of yards after initial contact.
He had about 28 carries, and I can tell there's a couple stories about that. It's late in the game, and I'm trying to ice the game away for him. And I keep on calling him. I don't want to take it out of his hands. He's doing well. So he's looking at the sideline, begging the play caller on the sideline. I was in the booth at the time relaying it down, begging the guy that's signaling it in to not call his number again. He had 28 carries, and he was flat out exhausted. The problem with that is, I think Isaiah Smith was in there, and he was a freshman running back. I didn't want to pitch the ball anymore, so I was just trying to kill the clock as best I could. So he was the only choice we had.
Dominique had a heck of a game. There's no doubt about that one. And then last year, home games with Sanford have been nail-biters. In that instant, last year was, I remember coming away from that one, and when you won the game, you went to 9-0 on the year. They miss a field goal, it hits the right upright and comes out. I remember thinking last year, wow, this game could have gone either way. You must be living right because you just went to 9-0, and a great, great football game. For as disappointing as the one in 14 was to lose, I would imagine this one was as gratifying to win.
That 2014 for me, it was a great atmosphere. It was homecoming. We had 16,000 in there. People were funneling out. People were funneling back in. It was one of those things that you look at the film, and the Altman Center is 3 deep on the second level there. And what a phenomenal football game. It was a complete back and forth. There were some great offensive drives. There were some great defensive stops in that game. But really, when it came down to it, is I will walk into Mark Clark Hall, and if you look on the right-hand side of it, in the trophy case on the right-hand side is the game ball. That was the game ball that I had given to the Corps cadets because of the overtime at their end of the field. It was so loud that the Sanford offense couldn't communicate, forced them to jump off sides. In overtime, you're going backwards, and that helped contribute to the missed field goal. So every time I walk into Mark Clark Hall, I look at that ball and I think about that game, and hopefully it's one of those games for a lot of people that were like, hey, I was at that game. We went 9-0. It clinched the playoffs. It clinched the SoCon, our second title. And what a phenomenal game it was homecoming.
Hey, yeah, you mentioned it was in that end, too. You couldn't hear anything after that thing hit the upright, I guarantee it, because everybody was certainly celebrating that victory. That was definitely awesome over there. So we are going to take a quick timeout, and when Coach and I come back, we're going to dig in a little bit more on the opponent for the week. We will tell you about the Sanford Bulldogs and what they have in store for the Citadel Bulldogs, who will make that trip mostly on Interstate 20 to get there coming up this Saturday for the 3 o'clock ball game. With head coach Brent Thompson, I'm Mike Legg. This is the Brent Thompson Radio Show from Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown at 126 Williman Street on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM and 910 AM.
TD Bank's new intern, Bart, is one of those robots from another bank. We're training him to bank human. Bart, why are you winding the clock back?
The clock stated 11:35 p.m., but they are still working.
The clock is fine. Our live customer service is available all night, and all day for that matter. He's learning.
At TD Bank, we do things differently.
Hello?
Like live customer service.
Hello?
24/7. Don't just bank. Bank human.
Since 2002, the lottery has helped award more than 1 million scholarships. So when you play, you're not just taking a chance. You're also giving one.
The great thing about an old truck is you can treat it like an old truck, which is exactly why you got a truck in the first place. It's not old, it's broken in. So keep it running longer, stronger, with quality parts and a whole lot of Napa know-how. That's not gonna buff out.
Welcome back, Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown. This is the Brent Thompson Radio Show, live every Wednesday night from 7 until 8 on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM and 910 AM. I'm your host, Mike Legg, among a cast of sympathetic Citadel Bulldog fans right here in front of us. So look at this group now. Good group here. And we've got the, for those of you who are checking it out on YouTube tonight, you can see that there is a Sanford and there is a Citadel Bulldog helmet here. The one that is in front of me is in big trouble this weekend. Big trouble whenever the Citadel Bulldogs go to Birmingham on that long trip and go after this team yet again. All right, let's talk initial scouting reports, if we can here, Coach, about what the Sanford Bulldogs are all about. You're an offensive guy. So first of all, you've paid a lot of attention, obviously, to their defense. So what will Sanford do on the defensive side against your ball club this week?
Well, typically they've played a bear defense against us, which is a little bit foreign to us. They cover the guards and the center, and what we can do to be able to establish our fullback, which is always our within our game plan. We always want to make sure that we can get our fullback running, make sure that we don't take one of our threats off the field at one time. So they've done it fairly effectively against us at times. They're big and very stout up the middle. They've got a nice linebacker in there, and they've got a couple of big defensive linemen. So we've got our work cut out for them, for us. We've been able to practice for the last, I guess it's been about 5 or 6 practices now against it, and trying to make sure that we are, we've got a little bit of a different game plan, but we can't change who we are. We are what we are. We do what we do, and we just got to do it better than them.
It sure did work the last time you were there. There's no question about that. So there's your initial offensive scout. What about them on the defensive? I guess one thing I would mention before we go too far is that I had just mentioned when interviewed on a radio show today about the Sanford game that Miles Pierce ought to feel a little special about this particular game. His brother, Michael, played at Sanford, and so now Miles gets to go and play on the same field that his brother played on.
Yeah, Michael now plays for Baltimore. He was tough. He was big and stout in there. A little bit different than Miles' body build. He played the nose guard for him, but the last time that we were up there was his senior year, so they had an opportunity to play against each other in the home state of Alabama, which was nice for him.
Very interesting. Their father had also played college football and had been at Tulane. Michael had been at Tulane a little bit as well. Miles, of course, playing for the Citadel Bulldogs. So now, offensively for Sanford, this is a wide-open group. They are going to throw a lot of wide receivers at you. And one thing I want to mention here is you do realize that with as well as you played against Sanford in 2015, you are somewhat responsible for Devlin Hodges because you guys chased Michael Eubank, a transfer at the time, to the bench, and he was replaced by Devlin Hodges, and he's been a handful ever since.
Yeah, that was his first time in the game. I think he came in the third quarter. And, ever since then, we've kind of rued the day, I guess. But it was one of those, I'm happy to see the one guy go, but yet we certainly were unhappy when we realized what we were getting ourselves into. What a terrific player, offensive player of the year. controls that offense better than anybody I've seen, throws it extremely well on the run. He's not only a good pocket passer, he's got such a quick release that he can get the thing out on time. And then when it breaks down, he can extend the life of a play. He can scramble around, and he's surrounded by legitimate good wide receivers out there. We watched him, and I just happened to catch the overtime live last week and shooting out the overtime at the last 2 drives of that Western game. And he traveled the course of about 96, 97 yards in the matter of about 40 clock seconds. And I don't think he used one single timeout, so he's got great masterful control over that clock. And they do a heck of a job of finding open receivers and got it all the way down to about the 3, 2, 1 yard line right in there. Now, before they couldn't get it in the end zone.
Now, the difference I noticed last week was that they got it to the 3. They're down by 4, so you can't kick a field goal in this circumstance. And you have to go for the touchdown. When you're a spread team and you throw it all the time, a 3-yard field can be a bit of a challenge. You can't create any separation.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You can only spread the field so much for so long until you get the ball all the way down there, and then you've got to probably do something a little bit different, whether it's some pick or rub routes or try to find a little bit way to run the ball inside. That certainly helps those offenses out.
Now, you've told me before that even when a quarterback is going to throw it a lot, and this young man has thrown it a lot so far this year, you still want to make them one-dimensional. And in their case, one-dimensional means throwing the football. But last year, talk about what this guy did, Hodges. He led their team in rushing. Everybody else, you had them penned in, but this guy got a few yards. And how many of those were via the scramble when everything else broke down?
A lot of them are the scramble because everybody's dropping off and they're dropping 8 and they're trying to get back into coverage. There's only so many zones that you can cover, but the one thing that you notice, he did rip off a long one against us. I believe it was a 40 or 50 yarder on a quarterback draw. So once he gets you out of the box and gets you in the situation where you're not expecting a run, they call it a draw. I mean, no, that can be equally as dangerous. And he does run fairly well.
Yeah, let's talk about special teams and what this group does from a special teams perspective. One of the wide receivers plays into this deal.
Yeah, McKnight, he's a tremendous punt returner. We've got to watch out for him. We've been stressing hang time. We've been stressing trying to pin the ball a little bit, possibly, not kicking it to him much, getting down there and covering the field as best we can. We've watched him make a lot of yards out of very little blocking going on out there. He's very free with the ball. He'll let it bounce and he'll pick the thing up. He's not afraid to field it. He's very confident in his ability, and he should be.
You had mentioned after the ETSU game that there were things special teams-wise you wanted to shore up as far as what you guys are doing, punt team, stuff like that. How much of your time did you spend during the open date working on special teams?
We devoted probably a good, I would say 20% of some of those practices last week to that. And we kind of got back to our normal this week. The thing that we missed not practicing the previous Sunday is usually meant for a special teams fundamental. So this week we got back to special teams fundamentals and making sure that we can properly execute. That's one thing that you don't get a whole lot of work on is we've got individual time for offense and defense that we work all of our fundamentals. But when it comes to special teams, we're limited. So Coach Gunner does a good job of scheduling in Sundays for us and as well as a little bit during the week.
In Birmingham on Saturday, we are expecting sunny skies and 83. It's been about 90 today.
Yeah, not hot enough for us.
You guys are in your element.
Yeah, we need a little bit hotter.
You would be
Where's
okay.
Where's that dew point at, really?
You'd be okay at 98, 99, huh?
Absolutely. We'll take it all day long.
So, now I know you take them one game at a time. You want to look at games one game at a time. But when you look at your schedule, after you've had the open date, you have a stretch of games that's pretty big. Quality opponents, either you go to, and that's Sanford, and then you got Mercer, you've got Wofford. Again, you take them one at a time, but you have to know that you got a pretty rough stretch coming up here and have to be sharp.
Yeah, once we realized we got all of our non-conference games out of the way, except for Clemson, of course, which that'll be a tough one. We knew we were going to get into Southern Conference play, and by the looks of the league, even after last week, you look around the league, and there's not a whole lot of teams out there that you say, oh, we can get these guys. I mean, ETSU goes out there and beats Mercer last week in a very good football game. I happened to catch some of that. And, Chattanooga, you think is 0-3, but they played 3 very good football teams. And, they certainly scored a lot of points last week against VMI. So then you got your solid teams. Wofford's always finding a way to win. They don't give up a lot of points. They hold on to the football. They do what they do to win games. Furman goes up and puts it on Colgate, a good Patriot League team up there, in a tough place to play, of course. And with the new staff there, they're going to probably be at that point where they're starting to catch fire late in the year. So throughout, no matter who we are playing from here on out, is going to be a good football team. There's no more gimmies out there.
So is your bunch a healthy bunch right now, given the open date, given the way the season in the first 3 games has fallen?
Yeah, we're probably more healthy than we did coming out of camp. We had an opportunity to take, I think we practiced in the last 10 days now. I think we practiced about 5 times or so. So we had an opportunity to get our legs back underneath us, get some more treatment in there, and take care of some of really just the twisted ankles and the fingers and the hands and those kind of things. The swelling starts to go down, the legs start to get back underneath you, and you start to get into a better routine, which we weren't in a good routine when we were coming back from ETSU.
Coach, talk about competition during the season and how healthy it is to have it, where you have the most of it right now.
We've got great competition at quarterback. We've got pretty good competition at wide receiver. We've got great competition at A-back. Offensive line is we are what we are right there. I would love to have a little bit more. B-back, we're starting to get more competition when you add Brandon Berry into the mix. So that's a positive. When you go to the defensive side, I think we've got a great mixture of not only competition on the defensive line, but you got guys playing, the guys that you can feel that you can put in there and are getting better with each rep that they're taking in each game that's coming by. Linebacker-wise, there's Willie Eubanks is breaking into the mix, and he's getting better. He's providing, I wouldn't say competition for Miles, but yet he's providing us with a little bit of a comfortable feeling, hey, that we've got an heir apparent to Miles. We've got guys that can be able to take over. We've got guys that can be able to slide into different positions on that line. And same thing with Russell Hubbs. He's got another year left, so he just moved there in the spring, so he's given us a little bit more depth at that position. Cornerback is, I always talk about Wally Wilmore. He's one of those guys that's, he's making a press not only at corner but also as the punt returner. Special teams is always big. Kurt Nixon's been our punt returner, and he's a very solid punt returner for us. But Wally's not far behind, which is always nice to have. Jalen Barr is getting a lot of reps. I really like this freshman class. They're competitive, they're tough, they're hungry. They're doing a good job. We know we've got developmental guys. There's about 6 or 7 developmental guys in that group. But really, we've also got about 4 or 5 guys that we're playing with and that are making great impact for us. We've got 2 on the O-line. We've got Brandon Berry in the backfield. We've got 2 or 3 on defense that are making an impact. And that's good to see. It's good to see that our recruiting is paying off.
Speaking of Brandon Berry, he did not play in the first 2 games. And then you found that he, or at least his skill set, kind of fit with ETSU. Therefore, red shirt comes off. How legitimately do you think, what was the possibility, I suppose, that you were going to be able to leave that red shirt on him? That must have been, kind of tough. And maybe one of those things even where you're thinking, I don't know if this is going to last very long either.
Yeah, we needed to make that decision fairly quickly. And by the 3rd game was probably about the ideal situation for us. And I went into halftime and I said, look, we need a little bit more pop at B-back. We need a little bit bigger body in there. If we're going to win this football game, we're probably going to need to use him. And it was well worth it. We had approached the kid. We had approached Brandon going into that game saying, would you mind if we played you? And he was all about it. He wants to play. He's very hungry. He's a competitor in there. So he had no regrets about it at all. So from here on out, we're going to make an effort to play him, and he's doing great. I've got no issue with him right now. He's on top of this game plan, so you'll see him this weekend for sure.
So a lot of times when a red shirt is on and then comes off, you go from trying to find ways not to put him on the field to sometimes maybe even thinking, okay, now once the red shirt's off, you're really going to see him. Is that kind of where he fits? That's
exactly what we do. We said, where does he fit on special teams? We got to get him reps in there. You got to probably find a way to get him more competitive with the 1s and the 2s, coach him more, give him more reps in practice. You know what the other guys are going to give you. Let those guys have some reps off. And let him be more of a rep eater in there and get better. He's going to get better every single practice.
Coach and I are going to come back with more. We have one more segment in tonight's show, and we'll take you all the way till 8 o'clock. This is the Brent Thompson Radio Show, airing live from Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown. 126 Williman Street is the address where you can catch us. And a new special is on the table for Citadel Cadets. It just came out today, so it may really hit next week, and that is 50% off wings from 6 p.m. to close at this location, 126 Williman Street, on Wednesdays when we have Coach's show. And that will go all the way until November the 8th. It is a dine-in only special, but a great special it is. We hope that Citadel Cadets will take advantage of that special starting next week, or you can still get in there tonight. Matter of fact, it's from 6 p.m. until close here at the downtown location, 126 Williman Street. Coach and I return with more in a moment on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM and 910 AM.
Eat the new half-pound roast beef sandwiches. 8 ounces of thinly sliced, tender roast beef. And if you really want a quarter pound of beef, that's cool. Just eat half of one of these. Arby's, we have the meats.
Style. Selection. Service. Quality. Value. See what everyone is talking about. Ashley Furniture Home Store.
How do we make sure there's toppings in each bite of Papa John's pizza? We check 80,000 times a year. Now get an extra large 2-topping pizza for just $11. Everyone's doing their part to make your game day better.
Dad, grab something good. No junk food, please.
Go for the Trumu! It's delicious!
That's chocolate. But it's nutritious and contains no artificial growth hormones.
Trumu, a truly good thing anytime.
Back from Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue, 126 Williman Street. Thank you very much for being alongside this evening as we roll through our schedule of shows, and back again for another one next week from 7 until 8. Looking forward to talking about the game that will be had this weekend against Sanford. So let me look at some of the other games for this weekend and weigh in, if you would, Coach, on where things are. You've talked about surprises in the league with ETSU with a win over Mercer. This week's games include ETSU going on the road now, and they're going to play at Furman this weekend, as you've got ETSU at 2-2, and you got Furman at 1-3. That's
an interesting game. You know, I didn't look at that game. I didn't see it just yet because we played ETSU already, and we got Furman down the line. That'll be a pretty good test for Furman and a pretty good test for ETSU. It'll be kind of a litmus test as to where either one of them are at within this league. I look forward to seeing the outcome of that one.
Any dealings that you've had with Furman's new coach, Clay Hendricks? He was at Air Force.
Yeah, you know, he's an option guy, so I've known him for years. He's gotten around, and in fact, I knew him when he was the first time he was at Furman. He was the offensive line coach. I saw him talk at a clinic many years ago, and then kind of kept track of him when he was out there. And, of course, we watch a lot of Air Force film. So very nice guy. I really have always had a great relationship with him, and is a terrific football coach.
You've referred to with me a few times that clinics, option clinics, how often do they happen? How much do you get to those sorts of things now that you're a head coach?
I used to do a lot more when I was the coordinator. Now I kind of pass it on off to Coach Conti and Coach Boyd and those guys that have been with me for a while. But I still like to do a couple of them a year. I still like to do at least one a year to kind of keep me sharp, get me out a little bit. And even if one of those guys are doing it, I'll go out there and maybe just join them and watch their clinic a little bit. What clinics do is they make you become an expert on whatever topic you're talking about, and make sure you research your own offenses to say what do we do well? What do I want to talk about? Is it scheme? Do I want to talk about fundamentals? And Coach Boyd does a great job of talking fundamentals with the offensive line. So I do enjoy going to watch him. It's like teaching players when you teach other coaches how to do it. And of course, we run our own clinic here, which is nice for any option coach in the country that wants to come and just see what we do. We do some things very similar to a Tech or a Navy, but we also got our own wrinkles, and we've been doing it long enough that we kind of have an idea of there's some changes out there to be had.
Some of the other games that are being had in the league this weekend include VMI at Mercer. That game's going to start after yours. VMI still searching for its first victory. Mercer smarting a bit after losing last week on the road.
Yeah, interesting ball game right there. Is I think it'll be interesting to see how Mercer reacts to last week. That was a tough one. They're on the road. They lose in overtime. I think they led for most of the game. They had a pretty good positive experience up there, and unfortunately couldn't pull it out. VMI, of course, looking for their first win. Maybe looking for a little bit of life after the quarterback. That's a little bit of an issue is what is their identity? Do they want to run it? Do they want to throw it a little bit? I do think VMI is playing good defense, though. I've watched them. I've caught a couple of their snaps, and they're a little bit more experienced on defense. They've got two nice linebackers in there that have done well. So it could be a little bit of a defensive ball game, but it'd be interesting to see how Mercer reacts to last week's game.
Western Carolina at 6 o'clock on Saturday is going to play at Chattanooga. Western Carolina's only loss this year so far has been Hawaii, and you referred to Chattanooga a little earlier on. They played some pretty good teams to start things off. Jacksonville State, and then the third game of the season was against UT Martin out of the Ohio Valley Conference. I'm leaving somebody out, but they were really good. LSU, I guess, was game LSU, number 2 for those guys. Yep. So how good's Western Carolina in your estimation?
We're going to find out this week. It'll be interesting. We're going to find out exactly how good both those teams are. The one thing that I do know is their offense is extremely good, extremely powerful, extremely potent. The wide receiver and Detrez Newsome, they've got weapons. They've got weapons on the offensive side of the ball that I believe they're leading the conference in rushing and leading in scoring and total offense, and they're putting up a bunch. And I was able to watch their final drive that eventually won the game for them. And they're another team they can march the field in a matter of just seconds.
Last game that will be played, it's outside of the league, and Wofford at number 7 in the country at 3-0 is going to take on Presbyterian on the road. You've chewed some of that same dirt.
Yeah, I think Wofford, Wofford's played some pretty tight ball games here. I don't know that this one will be as tight.
All right, those are some of the games that are going on this week in the league. Right now, the standings in the league have Wofford in first place with the Citadel, Western Carolina, and Chattanooga all 1-0. ETSU sitting in 5th right now at 1-1. Then Sanford, Furman, and VMI all at 0-1. Mercer at 0-2 on the season so far. And that is where things stand in the league so far. Sanford has, as I mentioned a little earlier, preseason Offensive Player of the Year in Devlin Hodges. He's a first-team All-Southern Conference selection and also a third-team All-American. So a guy who's pretty dangerous where that is concerned so far that you guys will have to deal with coming up there. Be nice to get home once in a while, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. As I told the team the other day, is you certainly appreciate what you have at home when you've been on the road and you've been traveling for so long, and even not having a game this past week made it a little bit more difficult. But we'll be excited to get back home next week. But we've got our job to do here next week.
Definitely a big time focus for this week when the Bulldogs go to the Sanford Bulldogs. Other things, I find in the line of work that I'm in that when something is right in front of you, in your case a game, in my case another show that starts at a certain time and you have to be there when the show starts and that sort of thing, makes it sometimes hard to do the 20,000-foot planning type stuff. What kind of things can you accomplish during the season, and what kind of things do you have to be careful not to lose track of with the games and all the film and the things that you have to deal with?
Recruiting is the big thing. Is you got to make sure that you stay on top of your recruiting. We meet every Thursday on recruiting. We also talk about where we went. We went out recruiting last week. Of course, we had a plan for recruiting last week. We also have to put a plan together if we go and travel. We may go send some guys out in Alabama or Georgia. We have to make a plan for that. We got to make a plan to cover some of our top recruits. It's one of those things that if you don't do it, it'll show. It'll show on you eventually. So that's the biggest long-term planning. Everything else needs to be planned ahead of time. Between camp and your schedule, and everything needs to be set and solid in stone, unless of course you get a hurricane, and then obviously everything goes to pot at that point. But really, as far as the next step, because that's the next thing that's coming down the line at you, is recruiting. Spring ball is planned. Our calendar is about a year out of everything. Is all of our lifts are planned for the spring. Our spring ball is set, so that's all set and ready to go. Really, we're good all the way through until about the spring, because that's when everything starts to slow down a little bit.
3 games played, a open date, and then jumping into the meat of the conference schedule. By now, if you take a look back at the entire body of work for the first 3 games, you can see a maturation process or some areas that still need some work. I'm curious about your young guys on the offensive line. A lot of snaps for those guys now after 3 ball games.
Yeah, they needed it. They needed a lot of snaps. They've taken a lot of snaps. In fact, we had to get them a lot of snaps during the bye week. We couldn't give them a whole lot of time off. They need more technique work than anything. Everything that we do is technique-oriented, fundamental-oriented, and they're getting there. They're getting to that point. Sometimes, and as I told the team today, it feels like we were back in camp. We hadn't played in so long that we're ready to just go out there and play. And I think that kind of set in a little bit with us today. Is kind of tired of hitting the same guys over and over again. We're tired of the scout look. We're tired of the scout team. There's only so much that you can do in preparation for the game, but we want to make sure that we certainly are prepared. So tomorrow will be a lot easier of a day for them. It'll be more of a mental day than a physical day for them. And right now, I said the big thing for us is we need to prepare our bodies. We need to, make sure that we're sleeping and eating, and we also need to make sure that our minds are mentally focused for this game.
To a degree, is this like another opener for your team?
It is. It's just like an opener for us because we haven't played in so long, and really our last performance wasn't all that great. So we should be hungry to get back out there.
Now, the ETSU ball game, does that, in your mind, when you see a Mercer go in there and take a loss, does it, do you look back and go, hey, maybe this is maybe I was too harsh on our guys because this is a better team than maybe we gave them credit for? Or what did you think about, in hindsight, when you saw Mercer lose there?
Well, I was harsh on our guys for the way that we played, for the mistakes that we made. We cannot make those mistakes. The great thing in hindsight when we saw it all shake out and they beat Mercer this week was, hey, we knew this was a good football team. We knew they weren't the same team from last year. However, we can't make those mistakes and certainly expect to win football games ever again.
Coach, thank you very much. I appreciate
Thanks,
your
Mike.
time. You bet. That is head coach Brent Thompson. I'm Mike Legg. Thank you very much for being with us this evening at 126 Williman Street at Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue for another edition of the head coach Brent Thompson radio show. We're back again on Wednesday night from 7 until 8 next week after the Sanford game. Broadcast comes up on Saturday. It'll begin at 2 o'clock on the City, which is 102.1, 92.1, and 1450 AM. It's the Citadel at Sanford that day. Thanks to Mark Romness in the studio. Good night, everybody, and go Dogs.